Hey, everybody. Welcome to Moment of Clarity. No. Common Censored?
Government Secrets?
Government Secrets. No, this one's Common Censored with Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to get into a massive strike that has just been approved, one of the largest in recent years. And we're going to get into Tony Blinken's hilarious failed trip to Saudi Arabia that shows the continued waning of America's power around the world, which is a good thing when you're the sociopath that kills millions of people around the world. Then a bit of waning power is what we need to see. We're going to get into that. Trying to think what else. There's a lot of important story. Oh yeah, the Supreme Court ruling about Native Americans and their rights. We're going to get into all of that. Let's start off though with click thumbs up, click subscribe, click all those good things, click the bell if you're already subscribed, do all that shit. I know it's a lot of homework. Actually, if everybody could just get out your pencils, paper, rulers. The kids have rulers still.
Protractors.
If you could get out your protractors, your amateur tractors, and let's get rolling. All right, so we're going to start off with this massive strike that has just been I guess approved voted for would be the correct terminology.
Yeah. So the UPS Teamsters have voted. I'm going to pull this up on my computer too, so that I don't have to do the old lady squinty thing.
That's good. People don't like because it gets a lot of nostril shot with the squinty.
It does.
It's like kind of they can see your brain, and that upsets a lot of people.
Well, at least I have one. Okay, so the Teamsters have authorized a strike at UPS. Overwhelmingly, 97% of the workers voted to authorize a strike.
I'm going to call that the majority.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's like almost as many scientists who say climate change is real. So that's a lot. That's a lot.
I believe that's 99.7%. But
I said it's almost.
Yeah, it's close. It's close.
I didn't say it was.
Yeah.
That's math speak for not quite 99.7%. So that's 340,000 workers, which would make it the largest single employer strike in U.S. history. That is huge. Huge news.
Tell me the wording again. The largest
single employer. So they're all employed by UPS. So the largest single employer strike in US history, if it happens. So UPS has until July 31st to come to terms with the Teamsters on a new contract. The union's current national master agreement expires then. And if they don't get what they want, which we'll talk about in a minute, what their demands are, then they can go on strike, and that would fuck up a lot, like billions of dollars.
And we'll get into the details in one moment about what it is that they're calling for, why they have grievances. But I just wanted to throw in here that this has to do with the continued wave of worker strength across the country. That the Federal Reserve and the ruling elite are doing everything they can to stomp on, to tamp down, to quash, to squash, to all of those things. They're doing their best. I mean, really, they're throwing us into a recession just to try and stop this thing, which is workers having power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this also shows a lot of it shows kind of a resurgence of historical organizing, because we've heard a lot of workplace organizing that's new, right? Like Starbucks.
I might open a store called Starbucks and just see if anyone notices. Let me get away with that.
Starbucks workers unionizing and Trader Joe's workers unionizing and things like that.
You mean Trader Joe's?
Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I meant. But the Teamsters, that's a really, really old union. And this goes back to 1919, when the founder of UPS actually invited the Teamsters in to organize at UPS because he was afraid if he didn't, then his workers would just riot anyway. So he was like, why don't you just come in, do your shit, and then I have to deal with you, which is awesome. But this shows a resurgence of kind of like the old guard of unions, which in the past have been kind of like crotchety and kind of like slow to, or even not progressing with the demands of the rank and file, and not willing to authorize strikes, and union leadership being like, well, we should really listen to corporate and what their points are,
and some of that has to do with that the leadership has been captured by the system. Sometimes they've just been captured by the money. They are the wealthy in the union. Very few union members are wealthy at that level, but the union bosses can be. And they're like, let's not make things difficult here. I'm sitting on $1 million a year. Let's not strike. So yeah, it's good to see when the rank and file and the union leadership can agree on fighting against the corporate overlords.
And to be clear, this is thanks to the rank and file, because they got a very I don't like using the word progressive, but they got a president that's on their side. The Teamsters general president now is Sean M. O'Brien. And he's basically just said, hey, if we go on strike, it's UPS's fault. And that's, we have these demands. And if they're not met, we've already told you what's going to happen. And like, he's just laying down the law, as he should, as the president of the Teamsters. But that has not been the case very often in the history of union leadership. So this is really awesome to see such an old union really going to bat for their rank and file, which is the point of a union.
Wow. Ostensibly.
But I can get into like
so let's get into the details of what they're asking for and how it really has ramifications for workers across many different fields. This has to do with UPS, but this is a lot of workers have to deal with these same issues.
Yeah. So, let me first start by throwing some numbers at you. According to More Perfect Union, and people might have just noticed this in general, UPS raised prices significantly over the past few years, and actually just this year raised it up to 11%, which is a lot. So if you've noticed when you go to UPS that you're paying way more to send some shit, that's why they've hiked up the prices. Now, of course, that means that they're making a lot more money. They made $100 billion last year, and that was $13 billion in profit. So they made revenue, but then, the $13 billion in profit. And meanwhile, many of their workers are homeless, on food stamps. It's kind of like the Walmart, the Amazon aspect of this, right?
Right. We've heard about this with Walmart, where you have full-time employees who are other workers donate canned food for them to have a Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Like, how can you be a full-time employee and you can't afford food?
So, and of course, this, just like we saw with the rail companies, I'm not going to say what I'm not going to say.
Railroad workers.
It's
not her forte.
Not saying it.
It's not her wheelhouse or real house, I guess.
You know what, Lee? So this is the similar thing. All these profits went to stock buybacks, like $3.5 billion worth of stock buybacks. It went to the head of UPS, who made like $19 million last year. And they're, at the same time, they're trying to make sure that they're not getting any more union workers, and they're trying to get rid of their union workers and prioritizing gig work. Now, and for folks who don't know, gig work is basically when you are not officially hired by a company, so they don't have to give you any of
the perks.
Well, and like the measly perks, let's be honest. It's not like you get like free healthcare or anything like that, but like the measly perks that you get for being like an actual full-time employee. So UPS is getting all these gig workers, some of them barely making minimum wage, and yet they get to also go, they get to go on stage and on television and talk about how they have a union workforce and how it's so great, and they have middle-class workers and things like that. And it's all bullshit. The majority of their workforce is now gig workers.
And there's a lot of reasons that gig work is better for the richest of the rich, the ones that run the systems. Paying their employees less, but even to the extent that gig work allows them an easier path to tricking workers into thinking that they're making more than they are. So, you know, there was a study several years ago showing that a large percentage, I think it was like, you know, 12% or something of Uber and Lyft drivers were making $0 when you accounted for the wear and tear on their car.
Mhm.
So that's not calculated in your average worker. They're out there like, I walked home with $50 today. They don't think I walked home with $50 and I did $45 worth of wear and tear on my car. So it allows them a lot of ways. They can futz with the algorithm, all this stuff, all these ways to make people think they're making more than they're making, to exploit the worker more.
And I was looking up some numbers and some stats, and Finn Masters, who writes a bunch of like financial articles and things like that, found gobbledygook, yes,
the official term.
They found that almost half, 47% of gig workers in the US have full-time jobs. So that means
have other full-time jobs.
Right. So that means that, first of all, a full-time job is not enough to actually survive, which is fucked. But then on top of that, you have the gig economy, which they also found that 29% of people in the gig economy earn less than their state's minimum wage, which should be fucking illegal.
Right.
And that this is like 16.4% of the American workforce is now just gig workers. And 30% of younger adults, 18 to 29, are in the gig economy. So, I mean, we're talking millions and millions of people that are relying on a system, the gig economy, where they might not even be making fucking minimum wage. And of course, again, you get no benefits. There's no healthcare. There's no time off. There's nothing like that. That's the whole point of the gig economy, to bolster the profits of the corporation. And that's exactly what UPS found, because they were looking at Amazon and shit, and they're like, well, why aren't we doing that?
Right.
And they've even, you know, the point is, like, you know, you see these UPS trucks around. The idea is to do away with those and just have people delivering shit out of their own car, which I'm sure you might have seen that with Amazon workers now. They're delivering it out of their own fucking cars. So again, to like the wear and tear on
the car, we don't have to give them brakes. We don't have to supply the car, you know, supply them with gasoline and stuff. Like, yeah.
And it also means, like, if you don't have a car, you can't get a job, which, how do you get a car if you don't have a job? You know, like, it creates yet again.
Well, you take out a loan.
Exactly.
The auto loan bubble, that's trillions of dollars.
But so all of that, I'm setting the stage here. It's a shitty stage. It's a very shitty stage. It's falling apart, in fact.
It was built by gig workers in their extra time. Children mainly.
Yeah.
Built this stage.
Exhausted after 2 hours of sleep. They're hammering nails in. So their demands are basically like in 4 different tiers here. One is working conditions.
It's a lot of tiers.
A lot of tiers. Working conditions. And when I heard this, I was like, this is so fucking dystopian. I can't even. So there's things that you might think, okay, that's just basic, like making sure that there's AC in the trucks and no forced overtime. But how about monitoring? There are driver-facing cameras that UPS installs in their trucks to basically spy on you the entire fucking day.
Right. So you aren't taking a break when you shouldn't be.
You're not you're not checking your phone to see if, you know, like your partner called or if your kid's okay. Like,
and I remember when Amazon was putting these in, or I don't know whether I guess they had put them in some of their trucks. A lot of the drivers were saying, well, look, because we are given no time off and we're expected to make a certain number of deliveries and it's nearly impossible to achieve, most of us are peeing in like bottles. So now that's on video. Now Amazon is selling, you can actually buy them on Amazon, the best of drivers pissing in bottles.
But yeah, it's like, so that's one of their demands, is the working conditions, which includes that very dystopian surveillance system. The other one is no more 2 tiers. Now, there's like a lot of tiers. UPS back in 1982 instituted a 2-tier system where part-time workers got a huge pay cut. And this kind of volleyed back and forth between, like in the mid 90s, they won some better wages for these part-time workers, but UPS has been like pulling the reins on that because, again, you don't have to give them as much money or benefits or anything like that. And now that the gig economy has come, these part-time workers fall into that abyss of lack of funds and lack of benefits. So their point is, we're doing away with this. You have 1 tier. You just have workers. That's it.
We being the workers who want the strike are saying do away with the multi-tier system.
Right.
The multi-tier system allows UPS it gives them a lot of the UPS, rulers, the UPS CEOs and everything, the board. It allows them a lot of things, such as turning workers against each other. So some workers say, well, I make this much, I make this much, so we're not going to strike with you because I'm making good money. So you try and split up the workers. It's divide and conquer. And it just gives them a lot more means of control to have a multi-tiered system like that. Also, the ones making more think, well, I have more to lose here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why it's also so great to see all the Teamsters, 97%, 340,000 UPS workers, and even the ones, again, that are making a good wage, because there are some still that have been grandfathered into a good wage.
This would be a good time to show the video.
Yes. But that's another thing that makes this so fantastic, is recognizing that solidarity.
So this is more Perfect Union talking about that tiered system we were just mentioning.
It's 446.
No, I like this one.
Some of the drivers get full-time pay and weekends off, while a whole generation of new drivers, known as 22/4s internally at UPS, get screwed.
Drivers are divided into 2. They do the same job, but some of them are under that new contract, and the other ones are regular drivers. And the difference is I believe even $10 the hour difference.
I mean, there's no difference at all. That's what's unfair about it. The fact that 22.4 drivers are doing the same exact job. In fact, we're actually working much more, out there, longer hours, delivering higher volumes for such a less pay.
I have to be here from 4:30 to 8:30 in the morning. I have to come in, then I go home. I try to get as much sleep as I can get before I come in the next time, which is 4:30 to 8:30 p.m. that same day, and then go home and get some sleep again. I can tell you that I'm extremely exhausted. Every part of my body is hurting right now. Just the only reason why I come to work is because I need money.
Now, UPS wants all full-timers to work brutal schedules with no real weekend. It also wants to hire more part-timers, which brings us to UPS's dirty secret. The company likes to boast about high wages, but only a small percentage of workers receive it.
Well, I wanted to make sure we got what the dirty secret was. I couldn't cut it off pre-dirty secret. Wow, that's weird.
Thanks.
You know what?
Thanks.
That's what you deserve for the way you've been behaving.
Thank you. Yeah, so that was shared. That was a video that More Perfect Union put together, interviewing some folks that work at UPS, and so you hear just how fucked it is. And these are familiar stories. I mean, when I was talking to rail workers,
well done.
Thank you.
Because you left out a word, but still.
You know what? Everyone knows what the fuck I'm talking about, don't they? When I was talking,
you're saying whales were not involved.
They were not.
Okay.
When I was talking to rail workers, this was the same story. I have to be in at the crack of dawn, and then they try to say that it's not a full day work because I go home and get a couple of hours sleep in the middle, and then I come back and do the night shift. And this is and these people are driving big fucking trucks. I mean, in the case of the rail workers, they're driving trains that end up getting derailed and poisoning entire parts of Ohio. But in the case of UPS, these people are driving big fucking trucks. It's not like they're gardening and they're just going to cut off one of their thumbs, which would be bad enough. That shouldn't happen. But it's like you are working these people to exhaustion, paying them nothing, giving them no benefits. And then that's not even good enough. You have to endanger the lives of everyone around them at the same time. And this is, of course, another example of how there's no such thing as a vacuum. Like all of these fights, whether we work at UPS or whether we don't, affect us. And we shouldn't just care because that UPS truck crashed. We should care because we care about human rights. But
forget empathy. You don't have to give a shit about these people. If you want to be selfish about it, all of these things impact you. All of these things, when UPS figures out that they can exploit workers in a certain way, that then trickles down to all the other industries that are like, wow, look what they did. And that's what's happened. That's why UPS is doing this right now, is because they saw Amazon. They looked over there and they said, wow, they're really fucking those workers harder than we realized we could fuck our workers. Why aren't we fucking them that much? And he was like, let's fuck them that much. And that's basically, that was the entire conversation. It was a whole board meeting about it. And so this stuff grows, either the bad or the good. So when workers win these strikes, other workers look over and go, hey, maybe we could stand up and fight back too. So these impact you and all of us in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. So the other demands that the Teamsters have put forward are better pay for the part-timers and make these full-time jobs. Make it so that somebody can have a job and not have to do multiple jobs and, be exhausted and have no benefits. Put everyone as a full-time worker. No subcontracting and no gig workers. Just that's one of their demands. There should be UPS should be a union workforce, is their point. These workers deserve respect. And so these are badass and really, let's be honest, fucking basic demands. Like they're basically like, hey, don't treat me like a piece of shit.
I know, if you string it all down, it's like, hey, have actual workers that you have hired and that you treat like humans.
Cool.
And the UPS higher ups are like, this is an outrage.
Yeah. So this is what, I mean, again, like we'll see what happens, but the UPS basically has until July 31st to agree to these demands. It doesn't seem like the Teamsters are interested in budging on this. It'll be interesting to see if Biden steps in on this one too and says it's going to be illegal for UPS workers to go on strike.
Which is what they did with the railroad workers.
I'm sorry, what? What now?
You're tripping me up. The railroad workers.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this is also interesting with that because if higher ups like Biden were to step in, and then UPS, as we said in a previous podcast, if UPS workers then call their bluff and be like, okay, fucking make it illegal. There's 340,000 of us. Fuck you if you want your packages. What are you going to do? So
they could kick them in the package.
Nice. This could also precipitate similar strikes. And this is also, again, why these are so vital and why talking about them is so vital, because people in other workforces, regardless of whether you are part of a Teamsters type union or not, then you could actually see this and be like, holy fuck, it is possible not just to organize a workplace, but organize hundreds of thousands of people into demanding basic fucking workers' rights. That's possible. And I saw somebody in the chat talking about a general strike. And I think this is how you get there. You get thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to demand this and say, we will go on strike. And then that shit spreads because people are like, oh, it actually is possible for hundreds of thousands of people to go on strike. That is something that could happen. Yeah. And I mean, this will be really rad to see how this plays out. And, I think we should all spread this message so that people are aware of this deadline, but also so that people are aware of the power of workplace organizing. This is such a and then, like, again, there's like so many threads to discuss as well, like the creepy fucking surveillance system that workers have to live with. I mean,
which a lot of people have those even if they work on home computers. There's increasing surveillance by corporate entities of like, are you really sitting at your computer 100% of the day? Did you go have diarrhea? Because that's not allowed. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I was very lucky in some of the jobs because it's been a while since, I never had like a 9 to 5. I worked in recording studios, but part of like the culture of recording studios is that it's supposed to feel like a family. You know, we would hang out in the lobby and drink coffee with people who came in, and we would, you know, after hours we'd play music up in one of the studios, and people's kids would come in and, you know, and like play ball in the back, and like it had this family feel. And so the idea that anybody would ever be checking that like stringently is so alien to me. And like when we clocked in, we wrote in pencil when we came in and when we left, and that's it. Like that was just
because those were at least at that place you were treated somewhat like humans, which is not really the goal of capitalism. It's
No, I
to
know.
make us cogs in the machine, and anybody who's like not cog-like is a problem. You know, you're not being very coggy today. Get back in line. All right, let's move on to. I like that. This may be a smaller story, but it to me it represents the waning power of the U.S. empire, which is really important if we want to see a peaceful and sustainable world. The U.S. should not be an empire. You know, at maximum it should be a country, but you know maybe we'll get rid of those one day too. But anyway, so. Anthony Blinken, Biden's Secretary of State, who, you know, giant war hawk, representative of the empire all around, and you know who knows how many decisions Biden's actually making. So it really might be Blinken making most of them. So Blinken traveled to Saudi Arabia, and it was pretty disastrous a trip, which is good news. For the world.
for the world.
US
Anything that's bad for the empire is generally good news for
yeah,
us.
you know, it's like when you like with Darth Vader, you're like, well, one of those guys up there dressed in all black stubs his toe. It's good for everybody else.
Is that what happened here? This is the equivalent of stubbing the toe of Darth Vader?
Yes. U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken concluded his 3-day visit to Saudi Arabia last Thursday. He was the second U.S. official to visit the kingdom in less than a month after National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. And the U.S. is sending all these officials, by the way, over to Saudi Arabia because they're in a panic over Saudi Arabia particularly, but the Middle East and Arab countries in general, not just doing whatever the U.S. wants. At all times, and actually working towards peace in many regards. Now, Saudi Arabia has a lot of fucking issues and decapitates people in the streets if they're, you know, gay or something. So it's not that Saudi Arabia is the greatest monarchy.
But isn't that the thing? It's like we've
set the bar so low
where Saudi Arabia can be the good guy. You know,
yeah.
It's like when you're agreeing with Kissinger, who was like, we shouldn't be fucking around with Ukraine. You're like, what kind of world are we in?
Well, the U.S. empire set the bar so low that even Saudi Arabia seems like a peace-filled country. So anyway, Tony Blinken's visit was widely seen as a desperate attempt by the Biden administration to hold on to its closest ally in the West Asian region. Before Blinken started his tour, he had stated that normalization of Saudi-Israel relations was one of the top priorities of his government. However, reports now, normalization, it's the U.S. way of saying they don't want Saudi Arabia to keep pressuring Israel. Like, don't do anything that Israel doesn't like. That's what their view of normalization. Reports indicate that Blinken not only failed to get any assurance from the Saudis on that front, but had to concede some crucial ground on significant regional issues as well. Blinken reiterated his government's resolve to work for Israel-Saudi normalization in a speech, and he was then contradicted by Faisal Ben Farhan, who pointed out that, quote, normalization of ties with Israel will have limited benefit without a pathway to peace for the Palestinians. So basically, Saudi Arabia continues to say that Palestinians should have peace, that they should have their own nation, that they should be respected and given human rights. And the U.S. and Israel are not really down with that.
May I change the subject momentarily to respond to a question?
Okay.
I'm sorry. Jerry asked a question here. Why is Biden able to call to stop a strike, and the difference between what is going on in France? Good question. Basically, the difference is that in France, they don't give a shit if the president tells them to stop. And there's a lot of reasons for this. One is that there is, I actually spoke with an organizer in France and I asked her, like, is there just, y'all just have a culture of just like setting shit on fire when you don't like something? And she's like, yeah, we gotta do. So there is that culture in France that this is what you do when the ruling elite pushes you too far. Now, of course, in France, they have adapted to a lot of shittiness that they shouldn't have. And I'm sure that they agree with me too. We've all adapted to the, as Lee puts it, the gravity of capitalism. But the difference is that there's that culture in France, but I think also really powerfully, there is a bit of a net to fall back into. So for instance, if the rail workers were to call Biden's bluff and he fired all of them, what do? You don't have free healthcare like you do in France. The structures are not set up. There are a lot of structures of like mutual aid and things in France, like this woman told me, who I interviewed, that would be willing to take care of your kid. Also, daycare is free in France anyway. That would be willing to bring you food and things. We don't have that. And that is on purpose, right? They wanted to make sure that we couldn't call their bluff, that they would have that power, because they know that we have that power. But if we have nothing to fall back on, if they pull everything out from under us, if it's just an abyss, that puts them in a really sweet spot. So I'd say that that's the difference. Those are two really important differences. And I'm sorry, I just wanted to get to that. Now we can go back to Saudi Arabia and Palestine.
That's okay. I don't know where we were though.
You had just finished talking about how, well, if you go back to you like covering my face.
To the podcast viewers, listeners, they have no idea what you're talking about. Just every once in a while, you randomly go, thanks for that.
So you were just talking about how the issue with Israel will have a limited benefit without a pathway to peace for Palestinians. And that is certainly not something that the U.S. wants to hear, being Israel's main sugar daddy. Yeah. And supporting this apartheid state and their continued oppression of the Palestinians. So that's certainly not what Blinken wanted to hear when he went to Saudi Arabia. Right.
And in another significant development, the U.S. seems to have toned down its objections to Arab countries normalizing their relations with Syria. So the U.S. has spent a lot of time and money trying to turn Syria into a failed state, trying to just obliterate that whole area, whether through actual bombs or economic war. You have 90-some%. I believe it's 94% of Syrians are now below the poverty line. That's how horrific this economic war against them has been. And now you have the Arab countries, even the ones allied with the United States, bringing Syria back into the fold as a regular member of the Arab countries groups. That when they get together to discuss things like similar to the G7, but for different regions of the world. In another significant, I read that part. The joint statement expressed support for the Arab countries' efforts to resolve the Syrian crisis in a step-for-step manner. I love the idea of Blinken being like, we'd love to see you resolve this Syrian thing that happened. How did that happen? What went down?
Also, step for step sounds a lot like the proper channels argument with whistleblowers. Like, if you just gone through the proper channels, you wouldn't have to leak all this information. We have this set up to completely ignore you and make sure that your life is a living hell for the rest of your days.
Right. The outcome of Blinken's visit to Saudi Arabia is similar to the outcome of Joe Biden's visit to the kingdom last year, when he failed to convince MBS to increase oil production to ease global prices. It fits into growing speculations that the GCC becoming more autonomous. And what's GCC stand for again? GCC members. I lost it. I know it's
acronyms
I know it's the group. Oh, Global Coalition. Gulf Cooperation Council. Gulf Cooperation Council.
This sounds so nice, doesn't it?
Well, that's supposed to sound nice.
I know.
Becoming more autonomous and no longer towing the U.S. line. So yet again, I feel like I come with a story every day of how the U.S. is losing power around the world. And, you know, that is a good thing on so many levels. It can mean a sustainable world. It can mean a peace-filled world. It can mean that countries get along and are not at the point of a gun at all times as to whether they're going to do exactly what benefits the U.S. and what allows a tiny cabal of individuals to continue to enrich themselves. So this is yet more evidence. And Saudi Arabia is one of our closest allies. I mean, they're really the ones that allow the petrodollar system to even function. And here they are again and again and again standing up against U.S. pressure, which is a very new thing. This is new and impressive. All right. Well, I wanted to call an audible real quick.
I don't know.
I know you don't know what that means. And wanted to report that I guess it just happened. It's just coming out 30 minutes ago that Daniel Ellsberg has died. Everyone knew that he was kind of on his deathbed, and he gave some of his final interviews recently. But not only was he the renowned whistleblower of the Pentagon Papers that revealed the truth about Vietnam, but he also has stood up very loudly and tenaciously for other whistleblowers like Julian Assange, who's a publisher, and Edward Snowden. And so Ellsberg has passed on, but he's had a major impact on this country in a really noble and beneficial way. So,
yeah.
All right, shall we get into, in a few minutes, we will be heading to justrumble.com/LeeCamp and LeeCamp.net, my locals page. So those are the two places this live stream will continue. It'll cut off on the other platform soon, but it is free to watch at rumble.com/LeeCamp. So we're not hiding anything from you. Feel free to go over there and join up. I mean, you don't have to join. You can just watch, but click subscribe, free to subscribe there and everything. And if you want to support the show and actually make sure this show continues, then join up at LeeCamp.net and you'll get a copy of my new ebook, Dangerous Ideas. That's the only place to get it. So I hope you will do that as well. But all right, rumble.com/LeeCamp is where we'll all be heading. But let's get into this story. In a surprise ruling, the Supreme Court upholds the Indian Child Welfare Act. Do you want to talk about a bit what that is, or should I just read some of the article?
Well, so ICWA basically, it came to pass after the boarding schools. Well, boarding schools were still going on, but the idea was that ICWA maintained that Indigenous children, if they needed to be adopted or moved, that they would prioritize keeping them within their cultural space. So they would, find someone in the same tribe. They would find a family member. They would not put them with a white or, other settler family to basically force assimilate, because that's what the boarding schools did. And in the interest of maintaining their culture, which there continues to be, a tax and oppression against, they would try to prioritize getting Indigenous children to people that were in their same cultural space. And
so it was a response to all that's what you're saying. I mean, it was a response to all the abuse that had been done. I mean, really an attempted cultural genocide. Like you said, they would take kids out of their homes, put them in white homes, and try to quote unquote assimilate them, try to crush their culture. And so the Indian Child Welfare Act was an attempt to remedy that to some level. I mean, it's not like they're going to give them their land back or anything. They just, how about we stop stealing their children? It's a small thing that could be done. And in a 7-2 decision, Holland versus Brackeen, justices struck down all the challenges to that law. So again, this is some of this is confusing, the double negatives or whatever. They're striking down challenges. So people brought the case all the way to the Supreme Court saying, get rid of the Indian Child Welfare Act because we should be able to steal Indian children. And so the justices 7-2 threw away the law, the challenges, and said some on the merits and others for lacking standing. Amy Coney Barrett wrote in the majority opinion, the court rejected the plaintiff's argument that the 1978 law unconstitutionally discriminates against white families.
It's a white genocide, Lee. I don't know if you've heard about
Look,
this.
white families
It's a problem.
I'm offended every time I try and snatch an Indian child. People have said I shouldn't, and I'm like,
It's my right.
it's my right as a whitey. Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito dissented.
Well, that is shocking. I too am actually shocked that it was a 7-2. I was very sure that if at all it was going to go in the direction of actual justice, that it would be a very close call. But 7-2, that surprised me, I have to say.
Yeah, they don't. The Supreme Court does not often go in the right direction by a large margin.
No.
Normally, when it does something that's even remotely moral or just, it's like scraped through.
Well, and it sounds like part of the argument was like, your argument just wasn't good enough. Like that
If
they're
you've
not
done better.
right. If you would have done a better job convincing me, I'm not against stealing Indigenous children. You understand? I just think, lack of standing.
I think we can say we all support stealing
Right.
Indigenous children, but you, sir, go back to law school because this was a shit argument.
I
right?
think you can do better. Come
Did
back
you
in a
write
few
this
years.
with ChatGPT? Because this was crap.
Yeah. So I think that seems to have something to do with it, that they just didn't really like the argument. It wasn't strong enough, but the concept they're fine with.
What the hell are those schools called again? They're not normally
Boarding
called.
schools?
They're not normally called boarding. They're called. It starts with an R. It was a huge scandal.
I know, but now I've forgotten because
I mean, this article is calling them Indian boarding schools, but
God damn it.
yeah, I really want to know.
Residential schools.
Residential. That's why I always forget it because it doesn't make any sense.
No, but that's the whole point. Like, the Gulf Cooperation Collective or whatever the fuck they've called it, and like the residential schools and right to work laws. And
But so the
life.
The residential schools, which were in the United States and in Canada, and I think the last one closed in the U.S. in 1979. So we're not even talking about ancient history here. And they just all kinds of abuse. I mean, there was the stated abuse of like the moment this Native American child shows up, we cut his hair, which is in many Native American tribes is really important, has tons of cultural significance. We cut their hair, we change their name, and we throw out anything that was culturally significant to them that they've learned their entire lives to whatever age they're at. We throw all that out and we basically try and force them to be this good little Christian boy or girl. But so that's all the stated abuse. That's like, here's how we're going to, it's in the brochure. But then there was all the shit going on that was behind the scenes. They found many pits with bodies where kids have been killed. I know Canada has been dealing with this a lot recently. So it wasn't just that. It wasn't just cutting their hair. Many died.
They were abusive.
It's fucking
abusive,
horrific.
Emotionally, physically. One of the commenters, Fuo, points out that residential equals you're not leaving. You have no other home. Yeah, I mean that's a good way of
I think that's
putting
called
it.
captive schools.
Boarding school sounds like you'll be going home at some point, but residential school, like, no, I have no other place to go. So that is a good point. But this is, hey, you got some good news on your podcast.
Yeah.
On your show.
Yeah. What do you mean my show? It's your show.